Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Marketing Corner. I'm Casper and I'm here with Jen. We're going to be talking about the very fundamentals of marketing, ad copy. Always been the rage. It's been a little bit like sometimes people forget that it's actually one of the most important things. And now we're back to remembering that it's actually one of the most important things.
We're bringing it back.
We're bringing it back. We talk about tracking. We talk about all these different things. But actually, when all it comes down to is how do you talk to your customers or potential customers, right?
Amen.
But I'll let you kick it off, Jen. What are your thoughts in general about converting ad copy?
Well, I think ad copy is super interesting because some people just think it's super easy, right? It's just like, oh, just say what you do. But there's such a science behind it. I attended a neuroscience on ad copy webinar, and it was super, super interesting. And there's kind of two areas I wanted to talk about today and share with our listeners. And the first is, what is compelling ad copy? What's going to make someone take action? And the other thing is kind of the neuroscience, the stuff that I really like using our lizard brains. How do we trigger something to make people want to learn more or make people stop and actually read your ad in a hugely oversaturated digital space? How do we stand out? So the first thing to talk a little bit about, what is it that we need to say? How do we get people to take action? What do they need to hear? And I think a lot of us, we default to talking about ourselves in terms of our company. Our ad copy is about us. Let's talk about what we do. And that's not really going to get people to want to engage with you, right? Instead, you want to talk about what are you going to give them? What value are people going to get out of it? So Dan Kennedy had the 10 smart marketing diagnoses and profiling questions. So these are things to get you to start thinking about putting yourself in the customer's frame of mind to help you come up with ad copy. There's 10. I'll go through them pretty quickly and we can link them in the show notes as well. But first, questions that you ask yourself: what keeps your prospect awake at night? What keeps them staring at the ceiling? What is really bothering them when it comes to work? What are they afraid of? What are they angry about? Or who are they angry at? What are their top 3 daily frustrations in what they try to do? There's a lot of anger and frustration, but that's, that really triggers people, right? That's the thing people are trying to solve.
Sure.
What trends are occurring or will occur in their business or lives? How can you tap into that? What do they secretly desire? Business only. But this is something actually I'll talk a little bit about an A/B test I did on this very topic. To figure that out. Do they have built-in biases in how they make decisions? And for example, engineers tend to be very analytical. So can you word things in a certain way that works with that particular way of looking and thinking? Do they have their own language in that sense of words that, they would resonate with more? Who is selling to them? And how are they doing it? So what other messaging are they getting? And who has tried to sell something to them and what failed about it? So these are the top 10 questions that will help you, once you kind of understand them, will help you formulate your ad copy. Casper, what do you think about those?
I agree with all of them. But I have to admit that this is also something, ad copy is one of those things where I have always felt that, it's going to sound a little arrogant, I knew what I was doing, but I couldn't explain why I knew what I was doing. And I totally agree with all the things you bring up here from Dan. I totally agree. That's what I'm looking at. But to be honest, where I come from and where I've learned how to do ad copy, and I have learned it. I think it's 2 things for me, but maybe multiple, but 2 things. So first of all, I used to work as a salesman, a phone salesman, way back when. I have to count years now, but it's approximately 16 years ago I started. So I did it for 5 years. I actually once did a calculation where I said I called 100,000 people in that period. So I talked to 100,000 people in Denmark in 5 years ish, I think, approximately, right? I gotta tell you, once you do sales right like that, you learn actually what triggers people. So you know that, okay, now I'm talking to this old lady, she will trigger based on this approximately, right? I can hear it in her voice. I can sense it. This is what her triggers are. Now I'm talking to this young guy who lives on near Bronx, right? Or then he will trigger on something else, right? And once you start getting that into, I will never forget that, like that sales psychology. So that's actually what I bring into this, and then, so I always the things you bring up here where you say, go through what trends are occurring, will occur in their business lives. What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of? Let's use that as an example. Well, I immediately always think about that. That's always a part of how I think about around this. A lot of people, what they tend to do, and you bring this up perfectly, they talk about themselves, right? And they also talk about the features, right? They talk about, hey, this is the feature, right? The classical example is like the Apple sales one, where it's like, what does it do? Like, well, it does all these cool things, but it's actually just 1,000 songs in your pocket, right?
Mm, yeah,
So,
right.
and I think the old school model, I don't have the Danish expression for it, but we call it in Danish, we call it EFU. It was like feature, then it was benefit, feature, benefit, yield would
Mm,
be my English translation. So the feature would be like for a newspaper, it would be like, okay, you get the newspaper, right? The benefit would be, okay, you get it delivered at your door and you get it for a cheap price, and the benefit is you can read the newspaper. The yield would be that you can now talk to your coworkers at lunch about what's happening in the world. Good
and that's the
salespeople,
value.
they
Yep.
sell on feature and benefit. The exceptional ones, they sell at yield. They talk to you the yield, what you get out of it. And I
Mhm.
think that mindset I've taken into my cup. So I never talk about features. Like I never talk, like I try to avoid features. And
Mm,
we literally had a new feature launch in I think a few weeks ago on one of the products. And then when I got the copy, it was like, this is all about features. And I was like,
yeah.
the first question I asked was, what do they get out of it? What is it they want out of this? What is it? Why is this interesting to them?
Mhm.
Like, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that.
Yeah.
and then it kind of spiraled out from there. But I think that's the point, right? So that's how I actually work with ad copy. Does that make sense to you, Jen, in any way?
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
it's
I
a little
think
bit
that's
untraditional, maybe, but yeah,
well, I think that's maybe that's the most traditional, right? Is
yeah,
you walk the walk. You did sales,
yeah,
and so that helped. I mean, a lot, and I think that's really, really useful in terms of ad copy. You're absolutely right. Knowing those triggers is maybe something that a lot of marketers need to figure that out. And I think we put so much emphasis too on make it really short, make it really, really
mm,
short. And it doesn't always have to be short. I mean, I've done
no,
a bunch of A/B testing where I did super short, medium, and super long, and there wasn't really a difference in the conversion rate, but there was definitely a difference in the messaging of
yes,
what would push the people to convert. And so I wouldn't focus so much on like it's got to be super. I mean, of course, don't go totally over the top, but say what you need to say to get the value across. Some of the things in the neuroscience webinar and some of the research I've done into like web psychology, which I think is just so fascinating.
mm,
And I talked about it in the How We Stay Sharp episode, but Natalie Nahai's book, Webs
yeah,
of Influence, is really good about this, about what kind of terminology triggers people to make an action. Starting with personalization,
mm,
you talking about you.
yeah,
It's all
one hundred
about you
percent,
first, right? That's the first
yeah,
thing. The other thing, which I think is really important, and this is going a little bit sciencey, but there's something called the transposed letter effect. And this kind of got highlighted in a bunch of memes that went out where a statement would be written, but the
mm.
letters would be jumbled, but it's the right letters, just not in the right order,
But you would still
right?
understand it.
And you
Yes,
still understand it, right? And
I know the
so
principle. Yeah,
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 it's called the transposed letter effect.
okay.
It's been jokingly referred to as typoglycaemia, which I think is kind of funny. The origins, I think, are really interesting. It's kind of our survival brain, save time, figure something out, take an action. We see patterns. We see a shape of a word. We
Mm,
know the shape of the word the. We're not reading the, and we know that that's the. We see the shape. We're like the. Move on. And
mm,
that's one of the reasons that it's hard to stand out because people aren't really reading what you're writing. They're seeing the shapes, they're putting together their own pattern, they're putting together their own image, and then they
mm,
move on. So, how do we stop that? How do we break that up? And that's kind of the science behind ad copy. And that's where putting in a number, a percentage sign, an exclamation point, these things that maybe in our day to day lives we don't come across, it makes our brain has to stop for a second and go, hold on, I don't
mm.
recognize this. And that fraction of a second is sometimes what you need to stand out. It's what you need in that to stop that scroll, to stop that thumb,
Yeah.
going past you.
Yeah.
It's a small thing, but I think it really, when I've incorporated this into my ad copy, I've seen better results. It's not going to change the game, but if you can buy yourself a little bit extra time, then at least someone's going to read your copy. So thinking
Definitely.
about adding in a question mark, adding in a percentage sign, adding in something a little bit different, an emoji, but maybe not too many, because
Mm.
then you just look weird.
Yeah, but
Is
a thumb stopper, right? Like it's actually like that was actually one of my like second points. One is the sales methodology. One of the other things I've learned, like a lot of my ad copy writing skills from, is posting my own post I do on LinkedIn,
mm,
because that is the finest example of trying to convince people for anything or whatever and seeing if it works.
mhm,
And I almost do like you almost do that more than you test ads, right? So that I do that every week, right? Like every week, I literally come up with something new, and you start to see patterns, right? And one of the things I think you bring up the length, I think that's super spot on, spot on.
Mhm.
But one of the things I have noticed though is that also the structure matters so much. The structure in your ad copy. Just example, right? If you have a wall of text in front of you, no matter what it says, then a lot of people just like say automatically in their brain, say that's a
No
wall of
thanks.
text. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And it can be the best copy written ever. Doesn't matter. Like if it's a wall of text in front of you, it probably doesn't matter. Like most
Mhm.
people won't read it. A lot of people have always asked why there was so many line breaks on LinkedIn originally, right? Like why are people using line breaks? Well, the reason being was that this, I think it's 70 or a lot of, maybe it's higher today, but 70 or 80% of all people use LinkedIn on their phones, right?
Yeah.
So you optimize towards where people are and they use their phones and they really don't want to read a wall of text on their phone. That's like you can't do that. Like it's just not possible, right? So
Mhm.
that's why you put a lot of line breaks in to make it easier to read on your phones. And that whole mentality, if you don't get that in your copy and in your structure of how you structure it, well, you're probably not going to win, right?
That actually brings up a good point because even when I post these episodes announcing that they're out, I tested it out. We did like a paragraph, and now what I do is like, it's out. Here's what it's about, 2 sentences, and then bullet points. Boom, 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 boom. The eye can absorb that a lot easier. You can see it on a
So much
phone.
better.
Yeah.
Like so much better, right? Like I actually taught every single person who started, except the developers, started at Templify and how to do social selling from my perspective. So, and it was actually one of the most popular courses. Hashtag humble brag, but but uh, but it was really popular, and
Do a
they
little hair
recorded
flip.
it. Yeah, a little helpful. People can see that, but but it was really popular. And I remember, like, I taught them a lot of things, stuff like also talking the right lingo. So being in like talking the lingo that the audience speaks,
Mhm.
and sometimes also this is going to be a little controversial, but dumbing things down. I remember I always use a specific example. So I had a guy, I wrote CTR, like the acronym CTR, which stands for click through rate. And then
Mhm.
I literally had a guy, I'm not going to mention names, it's a few years ago, quite a few years ago, who asked, he worked with AdWords, and he asked me what CTR stood for. And I'm like, dude, you work with click through rate every day. Why are you asking that?
Yeah.
And that got me thinking. Like he was bold enough to ask the question, but I was thinking like maybe a lot of other people also
Mhm.
don't know what my acronym stands for. So now these days, I try to avoid acronyms as much as I can. Like we
Mhm.
talked about ABM in a previous episode. Well, that's account-based marketing. A lot of people ask me that afterwards. Like, what is ABM? That's account-based marketing.
Yeah.
And I keep remembering that. Like, if you want to go broad and then you want to hit more people, get more people on board, you want to talk to them in a way they understand. And it's not like to talk down to people. And a lot of people think, why don't you use acronyms? You're talking down to people. No, I'm not talking down to people
Yeah.
just because I write the word. It's also like if you think about it, from an acronym perspective, it's not fun to read an acronym filled thing. So let's say I want to say a sentence that says you can get higher click through rates through account based marketing. You can
Mhm.
get higher CTR through ABM. That doesn't sound
Yeah.
good. You get higher
Yeah.
click through rates through account based marketing. Okay, now I get it. Now it makes
Yeah.
more sense.
Those words are gonna resonate more than the letters will. Yeah.
First version is what the traditional marketeers, maybe the ones who are we are very performance based, but will tell you, oh, it's shorter. You should use that version. It's more compact. Okay, but people don't get it. Like
Yeah.
you lose half the people who read it because they're like, I don't
Mhm.
make the dots, I don't connect the dots, and that's something I've learned from doing the social selling part or like doing like multiple posts. I've learned that, and now I bring that into every copy and every ad I do.
That's a really good point. On one hand, it's like, oh, I'm talking to this specific audience and only they'll know what this means. But at the other hand, the words need to resonate. They need to hit you in the face. And, conversion is every marketer's like, I want one of those. I want more of those. Whereas maybe CTR, you're kind of like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. The other thing I wanted to talk about, one of those top 10 that I read out from Dan Kennedy was, what do people secretly desire? And
Yeah.
I think this is a really interesting one. And I think I talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, but when I was at Plan Day, our product did two main things, right? Saving time and saving money. Those are the two core value that people got. So I said to sales, what do people care about? What's the thing that they want? And every salesperson said saving money. And of course, that's what we went with. But then it got me thinking, well, yeah, I mean, if I'm speaking to a salesperson, I'm going to talk money. I want the best price. But what do I secretly care about? What is the thing that I don't even know matters to me until I'm faced with it? And so I did an A/B test. And so I did exactly the same copy, or excuse me, exactly the same audience, same budget, same
Mm,
creative. But then one headline was save time and the other was save money. And 90% of clicks and 100% of conversions came through saving time.
exactly.
So obviously that is the thing that people really care about. So they're talking to
Yeah.
sales and they're going to go, yeah, I need to save money, but it's not their money, right? It's
Mm,
if I buy a tool for Dixa, I'm not out of pocket my money. It's Dixa's money,
yeah.
but of course I'm going to want to save that. But what do I really care about? What is the thing that I want because I want to make my life easier? I want my time back. That's the thing that's
Yeah,
mine, right? That's mine. That's whether I get to have dinner with my kids or not is
mm,
time. And so that's really going to be the motivator for someone like me and probably a lot of other people. If I spend money,
definitely.
it's oh yeah, great. I save my company money. It's not my money.
Yeah.
But my time being saved, that's mine. And
Yes.
that's what's really going to, motivate me. So, A/B testing is super, super crucial, as well as finding these triggers, finding these
100%.
drivers.
And it's so cool you bring up this example because it's actually one of my go-to things I preach when I talk to startups and they have to launch the first ads on either like a LinkedIn or Facebook or some social media platform, right? In Danish, I call it the svisken på disken example. I don't think there's probably a term in English. Help me out here, Jen, but it's probably the term would be put it like it is, right? Like
Yeah.
say it like it is.
Say it like
And
it is. Yeah.
and what I mean with that is just do ads that talk about the core value proposition.
Yeah.
That
Just
just like
get
and
to it.
don't like overcomplicate it. And with brand managers, we had with Templify. So some of the most successful stuff I did was when I talked directly to their problem. Where I just
Mhm.
said like, are you also tired of people using the same logo you rebranded 5 years ago? Are you experiencing is document anarchy a thing at your work, or like
Mhm.
stuff like that that spoke directly to them? We did a campaign once. It was so cool where we did these small video ads, did in tall form, where would be like a text message between their coworkers, right? And then the sales rep would say would write to his to the brand manager, "Hey man, what do you think about my new email signature?" And then he would post an email signature with his big fat dog in the middle of it, like this dog face, like a super professional head of sales, right? And
Mhm.
then the brand manager was like face palm, like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
what are you doing?" Right? And that would lead into that's the core problem. One of the core problems Templify would solve is they would align all email signatures across all, and that spoke directly to it, and it worked so well. It was so
Yeah.
good. And it's just an example of saying like get to the core of the problem, like
Yeah.
what is it,
That
what
we
is it you
can
want to
relate
solve?
to.
They don't
Mm.
give a shit what you call the tool or what the tool is, what the tool technically does. They only care about what problem it solves for you, right? So get to that. And my point with doing this so early for startups and like and scale ups and when you want to start out with, like if you can't sell your product based on like this, if nobody's triggering based on this, then you have a completely different problem. And we can argue that you probably don't have product market fit. Very different problem,
Another
way more
podcast.
serious. but
Yeah.
if you can't do that, then all the copy tricks in the world won't make it better.
And a good hack. You're usually the one with the hacks, but this hack is worked really well for me. Is in my
Yeah.
ad copy. Find your best converting keyword in Google Ads and
Yes.
Bing, and what is the thing that makes people sign up for a demo? What are they googling? Throw that in your ads because
That's actually a really good point.
yeah, and
That's a
that's
good
how.
hack.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
impressed Casper with a hack. Everyone.
Yeah, yeah, happens all the time. Happens all the
I
time.
I,
But
I
that's a
impressed him
really
with a
good
hack.
hack, actually. That's a really
So, for example, at Plan Day, we were saying online scheduling, online scheduling, online scheduling. And when I went into the Google Ads, particularly for the UK market, they say Rhoda,
mm,
and people were Googling Rhoda. So I was like, oh, well, let's put the word Rhoda in American English. We wouldn't say Rhoda. That means something totally different. So,
yeah.
but in British English, they were using Rhoda. So instead of saying online schedules, which is hefty chunk of text, we'd say streamline your rotas. And we saw immediately an uptick because that's the thing that makes people convert. And that's the thing that makes them engage. That's the word. So Google
Ah,
Ads and Bing is a really good way of saying what is the thing that people are Googling to convert on your website and then throw that into your ad text.
that's a great example. That's
Mm.
really awesome, actually. I remember we did something similar where I had used to have a coworker called Piper at Templify, and he found we were doing a campaign to the UK market, so United Kingdom, right? He found out that I can't remember what the term we used, but for keeping your brands in order, right?
Mhm.
There was a term that the Brits would use that would call be revolved around housekeeping.
Yes.
The
Yes.
housekeeping represented that, and I never knew. Like I'm
Uh,
Danish, like I might speak well English, but I'm actually Danish, right? And
mhm.
so I had no idea. And then when we used that in the copy, it worked so much better in that market.
Yeah.
And so we never tested it in other markets. Maybe we should have, but I'm quite sure it wouldn't have worked as well in other markets. And that just goes to show like you can learn so much on your data and then find a way
Mhm.
to implement that in your copy. A really good example.
As an American who spent 16 years living in the UK, British English and American English can be
Not the
very,
same.
very different.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think living in Denmark, of course, people are like, just use American English. What I find is the Brits, they understand, they understand, everyone understands, but American English will resonate, but they'll be like, this is American. This
Yeah.
is not a UK company. They'll know. Americans, if they see Britishisms or British spelling, they'll think it's wrong.
Mm.
So if you do color with a U, Americans are like, you spelt that wrong. Speaking as an American, I get this all the time on Facebook when people are like, you're spelling this wrong. I'm like, no, I'm just so accustomed to spelling British style now that's how I
Uh,
spell things in my free time. But anyway, but
uh,
yeah, that's maybe another side take. If you're doing stuff in English, just don't think that you can just take your American copy and throw it into England. You also have to maybe speak to a British person about how you would term certain things. Yeah.
What about let's speak. Maybe that's maybe we'll take that on a different topic if there's enough juice. But my question would be like, do you and Dix do you guys translate for markets? Do you do translations, or like, do you keep it in the same language? Do you keep it in English across the board, or?
We use American English across the board, except some of the ads I'll put British English just because I'll see something and I'll go, let me just. But our website, all of our blog content, everything is in American English.
Yeah, because I actually think that's maybe it's a bigger topic that we should take somewhere else. Like, what do you do with translations, and when do you do it? Like, I get that question so much. Hey, Casper, should we translate our website, and when should we do it? And I literally had that question 2 days ago. So I'm not joking.
That might be another podcast because at Plan Day, I think I was part of 6 new languages. And that required 6 new domains so that you can rank and things like that. And then you have to change the product. And yeah, it's a monster.
And that changes the whole this talk about ad copy a little bit, right?
Yes.
Quite a bit, right? Because then how do you find someone?
But one of the things I did, that's a really good point, but still related to ad copy, was I did what we called an ad copy brainstorm, very creative name, where I took the top performing keyword in all my core markets. So in Norwegian, Danish, Swedish, German, Spanish, all of that. And I sat with my customer support team. I booked them out for a half hour in a meeting room. I gave each of those, because they're native speakers, they speak to the customers, and I gave them that formula. I gave them throw in a number, throw in a question, personalize it, and use this word. Use this word because this is the core keyword in your language. And gave them 20 minutes where they just typed out a bunch of ad copy. And it was super effective because you can mix and match, right, copy and headlines. And it gave me some ad copy where I could just copy paste from a spreadsheet for months and months and months. And one of the really cool things I noticed was the Swedish ad copy. The term was a stämpelklocka. I don't speak Swedish, but I remember that being like the core word. And the person wrote a lot about empowering your workers.
Okay.
And now I come from an American sort of British Swiss side of a hierarchy, right? Top down. And so we were doing like my English ad copy was very much like, get control of your finances, get control of your time, oversee your employees. But the Swedish one was empower your employees to take care of their own time. And that's because the Swedish system is so flat.
Non-hierarchical.
There's no real hierarchy and they don't like hierarchy. So this was something that, if I just did an English to Swedish translation, which is impossible if you try it, I would be totally off because it's not just the words, it's also the sentiment. And
exactly.
So that's something else. So, reach out to your customer support team because they're the ones talking to people on the ground. Reach out to, if you're going to translate, this is probably a new podcast, you're right, but a new episode, but talk to the people on the ground because it's not as simple as just word for word translation from English to German, blah, blah, blah.
Definitely not. There's a lot of sentiment. And I think your example is perfect. It's actually, as a Dane, I can tell you, like, we even sometimes look at the Swedes and go like, every time the Swedes have to make a decision, they have to sit 100 people in a room and agree, right? It's like,
they're very,
and it's like a common joke thing, right? And even though Denmark are also very like flat structured, like the Swedes really take it to the extreme, right?
But you couldn't do a German, if you compare German to Sweden, it's completely different approaches. So it's important if you're going to start translating to really have that local knowledge and understand how those people operate, because that Swedish ad, actually, I launched it and it was the best performing ad for like 2 years running. And I just never turned it off because it was the right copy.
It's just good. Yeah. I think we'll end it on this note. And unless you have anything else to add, Jen?
No, maybe just a really quick summary. Understand your values, get to the core of the value of what you do. Try to throw in a question and personalization, save your time, save your this, make your life easier. Throw in a symbol of some kind to stop the scroll a little bit, question mark.
Thumb stopper. Yeah.
Yeah, thumb stopper, A/B test. Those are my
Yeah.
key takeaways, and see
Yeah,
what
I
resonates
totally
more.
agree. And talk to your salespeople and focus on structure, right? Like make sure your structure is right. I totally agree. Awesome. I think we'll do a. I can feel that we are doing a translation episode.
Yeah,
Should you translate your stuff?
yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of stuff in that. So well, stay tuned. It'll come soon enough. And on that note, I think we'll end today. Thanks for listening, guys, and
Thank you
take
very
care.
much. See you.
Bye.
Bye.